touch on that. The main thing I wanted to talk about though first was I just want everybody to know it's not just put a letterboard in front of your kid and then they're going to tell you all their thoughts and feelings. There's definitely a strategic process involved with all this. We've been at it for 3 years. Everybody else can verify the same thing who's getting open or just going along with the process. It definitely does get easier and you see progress, but you got to work at it. I mean, sometimes when they're older or whatever, I know there's been cases where they could spell right away or whatnot, but like with the early kids and young, or with the younger kids, and especially I get a lot of questions with the toddlers, which we're going to talk about when one of those questions. It's not just here's a board and they're going to go at it. It's definitely some work getting involved. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I talk about with parents is that it also depends on regulation, their sensory motor profile, complex motor. So when I have a client that has more complexities with their motor abilities, like maybe has cerebral palsy or other more impulsive movements,
yes,
that can be more challenging. And so it's kind of like I look at it like any of us learning a new motor movement. Not I certainly could never be a figure skater
yeah,
because I just could not, my body is just not coordinated. So now I would need to work at it and I'd have to work extra hard at it in comparison to somebody who's naturally gifted in that area. So I think the biggest thing is to look at spelling as learning a new motor skill. And if we can really look and understand that, then we can go, okay, so when I learn a new motor skill or when my child in the past has learned new motor skills, it's taken them longer. So it is going to take, a certain amount of practice, and that's really what it comes down to, really. Just
yeah,
and you can attest to that because when I met you guys, it was like, okay, so if you wanted to be an Olympian and you're practicing once a week, it's going to take longer.
yes,
And sometimes that is the case because of resources. It could be time, it could be life, it could be schedule, and that's
yeah.
okay. It's absolutely okay. It's just it's going to take a little bit longer. And so yeah.
No, and that's a good point because I run into that a lot because a lot of people will like I don't even have a practitioner in my state or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're going to talk about your courses and then ways that parents can learn stuff, and there's books they can get and stuff that'll definitely help them learn along the way and speed up the process.
Yep.
But it's also when they're only working with their parents, it's different too because we've had a lot of instances where Marissa, my wife, is great, just as good on the boards, but it's different with the parents because there's emotion involved. She gets way more open statements with her practitioners than she does with the mom.
Yep.
And I'll never forget there was a spellers panel when we were there, and like 2 or 3 of the moms said the same exact thing. Like it's very hard for her to get open with me or him to get open with me. And then the speller said the same thing, something about the emotion involved. So it's a lot easier with a practitioner, and the more you can, if you have access to one, it's just way better. So obviously you can only do what you can do in certain situations wherever you live or what money or however the case may be, but if you can get with a practitioner, it'll definitely make all the difference.
Totally. And I think for what we recommend, like you said, Chris, we're going to talk about the course. But even like during COVID, I was coaching everybody online, and
Mhm.
I have a number of families where I didn't even see them until later on when they were almost open, and they had worked so hard to
Yes.
get where they were when I saw them. And so working with a provider 100%, that's great, obviously. And I would encourage
Yeah.
anybody, to come or to go to a provider who can do even an intensive. Like we offer that
Yes.
where they come for a couple of days and we really go full bore. And then it's like, okay, I'm coaching the majority of the time. I'm coaching parents to be able to get to a point where I say to them at the beginning, my goal is for you to be confident in your ability to do this, to practice with your child on a daily, if possible, basis. And then you seek out another practitioner or provider, or you come back, or we have our online communication partner course, which is available through
Yes.
spellers.com. And we do that every 8 weeks. It's like every 8 weeks we have a new cohort. And it isn't like you're going to get open. And what we mean by open is conversational. So
Yes.
I explain what that means is that your child can spell openly their own thoughts, have a conversation, or at least spell out a phrase or two that's open. And our course, the Spellers CP course, is really meant to get the ball rolling. And then if you have a provider in your area that then you can go and see, and or work with someone online, those are options. But when underestimated came out, we just saw this massive influx of families, which was wonderful. But that's really why we created the course, so that it's a jump start to get going, and then you're working with a provider along the way. A
Yes.
Speller's method was never meant to be going in to your practitioner weekly. Like, I'm an OT, so traditional OT is that they come once a week, they work with the OT, and the OT says, okay, go home and practice this and this, and then come back next week. This is meant for parents or caregivers to work with them on a daily basis. It's a parent-driven program, because we want you all to be able to communicate with your child.
Yeah.
That's the goal, not with a provider, but with your child.
Absolutely. And the reason I say, well, because there is, I think there's like not doubt or anything, but a lot of parents are like maybe bummed because they can't get as many open statements. So that's why it's like more work, but there is emotion involved. So that's why I figured I'd share it, because Marissa will get open with Jess, but like with her practitioners, it's more like open paragraphs as opposed to open statement.
Right.
So,
Well,
and no, the
sorry.
other thing that I want to touch, it's very hard for them to do this. Like it's a lot of, it's hard on the body. It tires them out. It whoops their butt. I mean, those intensives and stuff, Marissa would sleep like a baby. It was like she was swimming all day, because what they're doing to control their body is tiring them out. It'd be like us doing push-ups all day. So it's just another thing. Like, you want to hit it hard, but you also got to know, like, wow, we've been doing this a bunch and they're not really progressing after an hour. Well, yeah, because it's probably too much for them to handle. And then you might get backlash of them flipping out because they can't control their body anymore, or they're dysregulated because they're working so hard. So
Right.
just other things to be aware of.
Totally. And I think one of the things that I work when I'm coaching parents is to recognize those cues, because it's kind of contradictory. But when parents come in, I'll say sometimes, like, it's not always about spelling, right? It's not all spell. Yes, the outcome of what we're doing is going to give communication, which is the goal, 100%. But another important factor is to really understand, what is the sensory motor profile of your child? What are those cues that you can really observe and go, okay, so we're exhausted. We're about to become very dysregulated. Let's do one more, and then we're gonna, call it quits for today. We'll come back to it tomorrow. But that's just as important for you to understand your child in a way where you can almost be ahead of the game. And so many parents are. The parents, and I say this, I'm a professional, parents know their children the best.
Yes.
I just happen to know a lot about apraxia and a lot about spelling. So I'm going to coach that, but I will say, and probably said to you and Jess, like, tell me what you're observing. Like, if Marissa is just so dysregulated or can't do this, like, I need your help. We're a team here to be able to do this together.
100%.
So I want to be able to help you to know what that profile is in terms of ways to support your child through this more challenging, task, but then also to build your confidence and your competence, because those are two different things,
Yes.
to be able to do this. And that's the goal.
Absolutely. So the other thing, did you lose your mic? Did it, like,
No,
are you there?
okay,
now it is. All right.
Okay.
Yep. Now you're good. No, you're good.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing is, parents will like almost go too hard at first, kind of like what you were saying, and you don't want to cause that dysregulation, because it's almost like the New Year's resolution people. You shouldn't go to the gym and train like a freaking athlete when you've been sitting on the couch for a month. So it's one of those things where you got to hit it hard, but you also got to know where the boundaries are, and you don't want to cause too much frustration. Because there was a point, I don't know if you remember, it was probably like a year and a half ago. You're like, you know what, maybe you guys shouldn't spell for like a week. Just try that. Because we were kind of regressing, and it was almost like there was frustration between Jess and Marissa, whether they weren't vibing at certain times, and there was other stuff going on, and that could play a role too. And like you said, like, your kid, like, before they're going to start headbutting something and you're like, we got to finish this statement. It's like, no, maybe just take it easy for today and just maybe come back to it and explain.
Yeah.
So it is a team effort where everybody needs to be kind of on the same page. And the more you could share and learn about different strategies and cues like that, the better off everybody will be.
No, for sure. And there's so many things that, interact to cause either dysregulation, frustration, whatever that is. And, medical challenges, puberty, like all
Yes.
those things, that growth spurts, they make a difference in the
Yes.
body, and especially with the sensory part of it. And when they're struggling to feel that internal understanding of their body, or their body in space or vision, or I mean, we can name a million different things. We have to also consider that piece of it. And I remember that that's very, like when I coach a family, it's very specific to that family. So in your case, absolutely, you know, and a break sometimes is what's needed to kind of get to that next level. But it's
Yes.
individualized, right? Like it's something that, and that's what I love about what I do, is I can individualize everything to
Well,
families.
like Marissa, for instance, and I think this probably would work for almost all kids. Do a little workout, a little warm up, maybe a little massage, whatever. Get their body moving, get them feeling their body, and then in turn, when they sit down for a spelling lesson, they're more regulated and able to control that body a little better. Because remember, early on with the swing, Marissa would just want to, she'd
Yep.
be flipping out. It's like, well, let her swing for 5 minutes before we start the session, and that made a big
Yeah.
difference.
No, for sure. And that's where, you know, part of the what we call intentional motor. So I know we're talking a little bit, some of the questions were related to apraxia
Yeah.
and that disconnect, right? And so one of the things that I talk with families about is that when we're dysregulated or our bodies are impulsive, we can't be impulsive or dysregulated and intentional, meaning intentionally moving our body, which is different than the disconnect that that our spellers sometimes experience. So when we're really dysregulated, I want to implement some of that intentional motor or regulation strategies of that heavy work, right? So swinging is absolutely something that can support spellers and their sensory part, but I also want to think about how can I get their bodies to move intentionally? How can I give sensory information and get them to move intentionally? And something like that is like heavy work. Let's do some slam balls, right? Let's
Yes.
pick up the ball
Yep.
and let's slam it down, a weighted ball. Like that's giving input. And when we activate muscles are actually a sensory organ, if you think about it that way. And that's why a lot of what I do with apraxia and intentional motor involves heavy work and, you know, essentially almost like gym stuff, because it helps organize their bodies.
Well, and that's Jess is a
Yeah.
adaptive personal trainer now, and that's made a huge difference because we're trying to build a stronger body here because that will translate in everything because it's a brain body disconnect. So the more control, more strength they have in their body, therefore the more control they will have with it. And another thing is like with the medicine ball slam, squat, whatever you can do, if they're responding to your command and they're building that brain body connection, whatever it can be, and we'd be doing stuff with like the laser pointer and her moving and pointing to stuff like that, and then just all those workouts, you're building the brain body connections, which then can translate to more success on the
Right.
boards.
Exactly. Because
Yes.
spelling, just like exercise, just like dressing, just like eating, just like, you know, walking to the car, getting your shoes on, all of that is intentional motor
Yes.
work. So, you know, spelling is really the focus when I see families coming to see me, but I'm extending that to essentially all areas of life, because we all do, if you think about it, requires us to be intentional with
Yes.
our movements. And so that is the issue with our spellers and my clients that I see, is there's the breakdown of that connection, and so they can't do these things that they really want to do. And when I explain apraxia to families, I think about it, there's components to apraxia, and you know, when I see that breakdown, there's sensory processing that's involved in that, there's vision and what vision is and their ability to move their eyes intentionally,
Yeah.
and there's also the reflex integration. So some of my clients still have what we call retained reflexes, which are preventing some of that movement. And all of those three things are intertwined. So when I'm assessing someone, even for spelling, because as I have my OT hat on, I'm looking at their posture. I'm looking at how do they do they tilt their head? What's their vision like? Am I noticing that they can't cross midline, because that can indicate reflexes that haven't integrated yet? So there's all those things. And, you know, the parents are like, oh, I thought I was coming for spelling. And I'm like, you are,
Well,
but it just shows the complexity of this simple task
well,
of pointing to letters.
Well, and we were those parents because, like, then when you broke that stuff down, because you remember Marissa, she would poke before, like,
Yes.
her mind was way faster than her hands and couldn't keep up. But we didn't even put like vision into context. And then you look back and it's like, well, that's why we sucked on the AAC because she couldn't see those
It's
tiny
hard.
buttons
Yep.
exactly or focus and have the fine motor enough to control to the one that she wanted.
Correct.
So it is just, and then same thing with they'll say like the facilitated communication, and it's like, well, yeah, because you got to know when to pull the board out because their freaking eyes are just a big blur and they can't focus, and then they won't be able to know where to point and everything. And same thing with stuff. a lot of these kids have different ailments that we're not really even sure of because they can't communicate to them. So it's one of those things where with an OT and stuff like the more work you can do, and the diet, we've talked about that, and we've had different, all that stuff in combination will give you the best chance for success.
Exactly, exactly. And I think we think about it just like us, right? You mentioned diet, and if we're not in a good place dietary wise, and we have gut issues, or we have headaches, or we have whatever in digestion, it's going to be very hard for us to get through our day at work because
Yeah.
we're just really struggling, and we're in this
Yes.
constant state of, essentially dysregulation. So I'm trying to teach a individual with motor planning issues or apraxia how to, do a task and learn a motor skill, but yet their gut or their brain or is on fire, or they're struggling with something in digestion, or they just don't feel good. That's going to make things much more challenging, just like it would for us.
Yes.
So we have to really look inward, and there's so many different areas that do need attention. Sleep is another thing. We're not getting a good sleep, that's going to
Yes.
affect our motor learning. And in fact, when we talk about what's called neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to learn new motor skills and new pathways and build new pathways, that actually, like, we think about it like, oh, well, while I'm doing the task, that's actually what's happening, is we're building new pathways. It actually happens when we're resting or sleeping. So same thing with like the gym, right? People think, oh, I need to go to the gym every day and I'm going to, build more muscle. Actually, you build when you're in
Resting.
resting on a rest
Yes.
day. Same
Yes.
thing happens
Mhm.
with us. So it is, to your point a little while ago, like, you want to go gung ho, yes, but you also want to give those breaks. And that's for sensory recovery. That's for muscle recovery. That's for vision recovery. All those things are important. And rest is huge.
Well, and especially when you're first implementing these things, because back to the New Year's people, they'll burn themselves out after
Yeah.
2 weeks
Yeah.
because they're going to go run 3 miles because they're going to get in crazy shape. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily the way to do that.
Right.
You want to work hard,
Right.
but don't want to work stupid.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and before we go on any further, just so everybody knows, you don't have to teach them to spell. Like,
Yes.
I don't want to like get too crazy, but like they kind of know all that already. Cause I get that. That's a big question. Like, how did you get her to spell, or how did you teach her to spell? Like, well, I didn't. They kind of all just know how to do that. So you may think that's weird. There's a bunch of other parents that'll vouch for that. So if you're listening, your kid probably already knows how to spell. And to piggyback on that, I get a lot of questions, like 3, 4 year olds. And I think one of them one of the ones I sent you kind of tailored to that. Yeah, your 3 year old toddler is probably not going to have a lot of success at spelling, but you want to know that it's there, that it's an option. And then a good thing is I think they asked, like, what can I do to get them ready? And I
Right.
think we just talked about that is
Yeah.
work them out, get them strong. I mean, you've heard me talk about Marissa. It's like I want to treat her like a bodybuilder type aspect, but in key, it's like the stronger she is and the healthier her gut is, the better off she's going to be able to reach her full
Right.
potential.
So we have what we call pre-spellers, because we have parents, especially over the last couple of years with spellers and the documentary, et cetera, where it's like, okay, well, I know my child, and typically it's like, well, they're 3, so they can't read, they don't know their letters, like that kind of thing, which, we can talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
too. But we'll say, let's do some what we call pre-spelling work, which is way more focused on motor and
Yes.
control. So I'll have families that will come in all the time and be like, my kid has great motor skills, so we're good in that area. And I'll say, okay, well, can they speed up and slow down on demand? And it's like, oh, well, actually, they just have one speed, and that's typically
Yes.
fast. And I'm like, well, motor control is also, intentional motor is also being able to speed up and slow down. The other thing is force generation. So being able to push and pull on demand is also intentional
Yes.
and intentional motor. So yes, they may be able to scale the fridge and not fall and get the snacks that they're not supposed to get in the top of the fridge that you hid, all that stuff, or a banister, and they never fall. However, if they still may not have control of their body. So we want to work on those areas. I think that that's typically for littles. And I mean, littles in general are going to be just movers and shakers
Yes.
anyway. So we don't do a session where they're sitting for 45 minutes. No 3-year-old is going to do that, or 4-year-old. We'll start, I've worked with spellers as young as 4.5, but their bodies are ready, and still not. Like, we may spell and work on 2 words or 3 words, and the rest of it is working on the motor piece to build the foundation so that when they're 5, 6, 7, that they can go into spelling that much further ahead. And
And it's
so,
more natural of a
yeah,
thing because they've been working
yes,
at it. Well, that's why I kind of wanted to touch on it, because people will see my videos, because now I'm bragging with Marissa and everything, because why not? But she's 11. We've
yep,
been at this for over 3 years. And when you put your 4-year-old in front of you, you're not going to get the same results. So I just want
right,
to make sure, but there is progress and things you can do to where you can be even ahead of where Marissa
yeah,
is when she's 11, you know?
yeah,
So just
yeah.
one of those things I wanted to touch on.
I just wanted to also go back quick to the reading and how, like, my kid can't read or spell, or they can't identify letters. And so if we look at, typically, if you're a parent, which a lot of parents will do, is say to me, well, I tried, over the last couple of weeks to teach them the letters, and then when I ask them to point out where's the A or the D or the Y or whatever, they're averaging about 15 out of 26 letters. And I'll remind them that what they're asking them to do is an intentional motor skill, which is actually the challenge that they have. So to go and identify a letter by pointing or circling or speaking, all of that is a motor skill. And so they're not going to be necessarily be accurate, but that doesn't mean that they don't know what letters are. The
Well,
majority of our spellers have taught themselves how to read and know letters and spell by a year and a half or two.
yes.
And so,
And they've documented that
yeah,
because the older kids will tell us that.
yeah,
So, and that
yep,
was what kind of drew us to this whole thing, is because the school we were sending her to would then be like, they actually sent home a progress report that Marissa didn't know who I was.
you're right.
Like, what? Because,
Yeah,
you send
yep,
home the pictures of, like,
yep,
we had Logan, me, mom, and like, well, they don't even know who her dad is. Like, my 6-year-old daughter doesn't know who her dad is. Like,
yeah,
that's suspect. So, and it's
yeah.
because everything's like a standardized test.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, if they don't hit it 3 times in a row, then that means they don't know, because that's what it says on my piece of paper. And it's like, no, you got to put a human element to this. And it's like they have a brain body disconnect. And just like I could go shoot free throws and I'm pretty good, so I might make 7 of them. But just because you might walk in and see me miss the last 3 and be like, oh, this guy's terrible, and I just made
Right,
7 in a row.
right.
So it's just something like that. We always have to remember, like, it's a brain body disconnect, and they're dysregulated at certain times, and they're not going to be 100%, especially early on.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think the important thing is, because I get this question a lot, well, what about the AAC? Like, why isn't an AAC? They're not consistent on AAC. And I think I never, first of all, say to a family, stop using any
Yeah,
form of communication. So if a family is using LAMP or Proloquo, I'm like, go for it.
yeah.
The challenge with it is that the kids have never actually been taught the motor skill, and they haven't practiced the motor skill. And so they're given something that requires a very fine motor skill ability, and they haven't ever had any practice with it, aside from, I want more, and then they fill in, right? So it's just over and over and over and over. And so they've myelinated, or they've permanently practiced that one movement, but then that's all they can do. And so then it's like, okay, now we're moving on to the next one. Versus when you're working on intentional motor skills that change, for example, spelling different words, you have to then be able to build those motor skills to get your eyes. So this is something we can, I think there was a question about that, but ocular motor, right? If our eyes can't get to what we're wanting to pick up or point to, you will be most likely unsuccessful. And so the eyes, and most families that come to see me are like, well, how do we do an eye test? I mean, they can't speak, so how are they supposed to? And the developmental optometrist has no idea how to do it. And so it's challenging, but I would say that the majority of my clients that come to me have a vision issue. So vision is different than acuity. Acuity is our ability to see clearly, which the majority of them can pick a speck of sand off my floor. So
Yes.
not a problem there.
Yeah.
But the way that their brain is interpreting what is in front of them is the problem. And so some of them see double, but how would they be able to say that? And so if you were seeing double in your world, more than likely you'd be dysregulated and
Yeah.
frustrated. And so, and I know that Marissa went to a developmental optometrist, and she was working hard with glasses, and depending on the type of lens, you may not need to have glasses forever and ever. It just may be that the brain needs help to be able to work in a way that's going to help your vision.
You're training it,
Yeah,
basically. It's
exactly.
just like,
Yep.
yes. And that was another thing, because we would run into that when we did do the AAC. And same thing, I've never once told anybody, like, get rid of that AAC, because I still will never forget. I have a mom who told me that their kid told them they had an ear infection with the AAC. That's freaking awesome. But I've
Yeah.
also heard so many get frustrated because my kid doesn't really use this. And the only thing they're really using it for is to ask for some certain food. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we were running into. Marissa would just hit like the strawberry button and the swing button. It
Right.
was almost like just a request thing. And it's like, yeah, that might be good early on, but where is the end result here? And what do we really strive for and want? want as parents. And dude, the open communication is every parent's
Yeah.
dream. Like, I want to know what freaking Nirvana song she wants to listen to or whatever. Because
Or
there's
not.
some,
Or
yeah,
not.
or not. Exactly. She's like, she just
Yeah.
told us rock and roll's her favorite though. So that's pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, she grew up with it,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So there you go.
we're
Yeah.
rockers. So that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, and the Beatles and stuff, but it's just awesome learning those thoughts. And that's just a place we never thought we'd be at. And especially at 11 years old.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
all good. Somebody, Liv actually had a great question, and then she said she had a great comment here. Just like when I stopped my daughter's speech assessment and squeezed her from behind, and she started getting all the answers right and pointing accurately. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like then she probably began to get more feeling in her body and was able to then control it better.
Right, and that's where it's the like the inability to figure out body and space, right? So many of my clients and spellers struggle with, okay, where is my body in space? They're proprioceptors, which are little neurons in our joints and muscles that, as we move, it sends information to our brain to say, okay, so your arm is straight up. Okay, now my brain, without me having to look at it, my brain knows that my arm is straight up. Many of my clients don't have that connection, or they need more input in order to really register. So that's where giving squeezes, or, you know, with spelling, with spellers method specifically, we don't physically touch the individual. We may give input and squeezes and give that like really intense input in
Yeah.
order for them to go, okay, here's my body. We may use a weighted pencil, right? So something like that is going to give more feedback. So yes, I think that it's something that we have to consider, which is what is their sensory motor profile, so that we can figure out and help support them to be able to learn the motor skills.
100%. And so I heard Rachel brought this up when swimming is really good because then they can feel their body better in water. So that helps because a lot of times they don't know, and I don't want to put anybody, but they'll chew on stuff too. And obviously, maybe don't have your 18-year-old kid walking through the store chewing on stuff. But if you're working at home and chewing on something, a chewy or something helps regulate them for a little bit, then do it, because whatever might help them be able to feel their
Mm-hmm.
body or get to that next level is
Yeah,
all
and
good stuff.
that's why we use weights
Yes.
in our intentional motor sessions, right? Because when you have weight, just like you were talking about, any type of resistance, so whether it's water in a pool or pushing a weight or pushing your body, even just working to get, some of my clients literally refuse to get down on the floor because they don't know how they're going to get back up. So there's a couple where we're just working on the sequence, the motor sequence of getting up. But in order to do that, you need to have, you know, strength, obviously, and endurance, but just body awareness. And so we sometimes just work on, like, let's just do body weight. Let's just push the body in a way so that you can give yourself the feedback, but then you're also getting stronger. So I think
Yes.
any type of resistance, we have a sled, you know, like you would have in a gym, where you're
Mhm.
pushing, you're pulling.
Yes.
And that's really what I learned early on from non-speakers, is that they were like, you know, and I remember it was Ito in his book, Ito in Autism Land. And I read the whole book, and in the section, he's like, OT did nothing for me. And I was like, whoa, wait, this is like huge for me. I'm an OT. What's happening here? And he said, you know, swings were great. The ball pit was awesome. You know, all those things where we could jump and play and swing. And, but it never helped with that connection. It was helpful for the sensory piece, which of course,
Yeah.
100%. But until we're getting the body to not passively, but actively engage in movement, is when he was like, now I'm building these connections.
Yes.
Now I feel more control of my body. And so then when you feel more control of your body, we can regulate so much better.
And then be able to show everybody how smart we are in more of an aspect.
Yeah.
What was it? Can we get to a couple of those questions? Do you have
Yes.
them pulled
Yes.
up?
Yep.
Because they were good.
Let me find them. So one of them was, what signs can we look for to know whether our child has
Yeah.
apraxia?
Yeah, that's
Um,
you.
yeah, I think that, like, what I had said is initially sensory. Very simple, very simple. We have sensory input coming into our brains, and then it results in a motor output. Now, the motor output could be efficient or inefficient. And so if we have sensory processing disorder, if you've heard that before from, you know, an OT or a doctor or pediatrician that says sensory issues, or you have filled out or you've Googled, you know, more than likely their motor skills will be affected. I have families that are like developmental coordination disorder, dyspraxia, fine and gross motor skill challenges, difficulty with regulating their body, on demand. Really, the definition of apraxia is the inability for the individual to follow on demand requests, right? So go sit in a chair, go get in the car, even though they
Yeah.
understand. And so there's a component of presuming competence, right? Because most families have been told that their child has a cognitive or an intellectual disability. They don't, if you don't understand apraxia, you're going to believe that, right? But
Well, and
because,
I don't mean to
yeah,
cut you off.
go
That's
for it.
the main basis because I just want to. That is such a huge deal because that's what screwed us up for 7 years. Marissa, go get the green block. She's
Yep.
bringing back a freaking whatever a spoon, and it's like, well, but she doesn't know what a green block is. She knew what that was last week. None of this makes sense, and then so you're confused. And then if you go by what they say at school, they're going to mark that she doesn't know what that is because she's got to get it 3 times in a row. So then when we came to see you, that's when it all made
Right.
sense.
Right.
So I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I
No.
know so many parents are going through that right now because you'll take them to these tests and then I don't want to say it, but you think your kid's dumb. Why does my 6-year-old kid not know what a giraffe is? We've gone over this 50 times and it still can't point to the giraffe. And it's not that they don't know what the giraffe is. It's literally that they can't move their body to point to that.
Apraxia. Apraxia.
Yes.
Whole body apraxia. Because
Yes.
just to clarify, right? Apraxia, there's when you hear apraxia, if you Google apraxia, what's going to come up is childhood apraxia of speech, or it will be a blog written by a speech therapist, because speech therapists can diagnose childhood apraxia of speech. There's a whole criteria that they have to meet in order to get that diagnosis. That is different than whole body apraxia, which is what I talk about
Yes.
as an OT, because it is the entire body that's affected. And when you can understand that your child has difficulty with turning their thought or idea into an action, that then can help with the presuming competence piece as well. So the two go hand in hand. So I hope I answered the question, but it's not like it's just one thing or just but there's a whole bunch of things that contribute to apraxia or whole body apraxia. It's not just speech.
Yes.
With that.
And
Yeah.
you did answer the
Okay.
question because that is the main focal point is like you got to presume competence because still to this day I'll be like, Marissa, come here, and she don't move. Or Marissa, go sit down, and she don't go sit down. And it's not because she doesn't understand what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
literally she's stuck or whatever. She can't
Right.
move her body at
Right.
that time.
Right.
Or she
And
might
that's
even
something. No, go ahead.
or the worst is like, and Ito talked about this, and I remember like crying. I was listening to the book driving to work and like crying because he said something like, they said, go get the spoon or whatever. And he brought back a knife. And then he's like, man, they're not even going to ever think that I even know what a spoon is now. It
Right.
was something along those lines. And it's like, man, we did that to Marissa forever. And it's not because she doesn't understand what a spoon or a knife is or any of that. It's because she literally just an uncontrolled movement that she just can't stop or doesn't have control of. And it could be so misleading for these parents if they don't really know what's going on.
Right. And I think before I'm going to read this next question too, but I
Yeah.
also think to keep in mind something with apraxia is like the on-demand piece. And when you ask your child to do something and they can't do it on demand, we tend to then go, they don't want to do it, they don't understand, they didn't hear me.
Yes.
Or they have apraxia,
Yeah.
because apraxia, the hardest thing for an individual with apraxia to do is to initiate their body. The second hardest thing for an individual to do with apraxia is inhibit or stop their body. So if your child tends to be more of the quote eloper, which I don't like that word at all, but more than likely they have apraxia, because again, when you're yelling or saying stop, you're going to get into traffic or whatever, don't you get out of the car, it's like don't run into traffic or stay right beside me, and they just bolt off. That also can be apraxia. So
So
it's
I
hard
actually
because you have to shift your mindset.
Well, and I actually did a video about that to explain that thing because it pisses me off. There's a lot of big pages out there that are giving terrible advice. Like, my kid doesn't understand danger. It's like, yeah, your 7-year-old kid knows they don't want to run into traffic. They can't control their body is what's happening. So that's the thing that it like makes me mad, because it's like you're misleading everybody, because when you say stuff like that, then they think like, man, my kid's dumb and doesn't know that a car would hurt it if it hit them. And it's like, yeah, they understand all that. It's an uncontrolled movement that they're doing there, especially if they've been sitting in whatever and they get excited or whatever and they're dysregulated, then they're more likely to jolt off. That's my carbon like a ninja. Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay, next question. How can we start prepping our child on our own before we get them to a practitioner? So this is going to be a plug for our book.
Yes,
Speller's Guidebook. Mainly because the reason why we wrote it was really to help parents, one, prep and to know what to expect when they go to see a provider or start spelling. And so I would highly recommend that. And it's interesting and it's funny, where I have families come in and their child is dysregulated or impulsive or self-injurious, all those things. And I turn and look at the parent, and they look at me and they're like, I'm following what you said to do in the book. I'm not jumping in, but they want to so badly. But it's those kinds of things that will help you, so that when you're coming, for a session or to go see a practitioner, you'll have a better idea of what's going to happen. And then if you're not, like, even if you take our course, our online CP course, this book will help you to kind of go, okay, this is what could happen when I'm practicing with my child at home.
Yeah.
So that's just, as far as prepping goes, that's what I would suggest.
Oh yeah, just
really
we used it. Yeah, we have that book and just used it. Well, we already took the classes and the immersion week and all that. And I am gonna have plugs for all of that. Like whether I'm gonna post this and then I'll post a recap or whatever and give you guys the spellers info, the website, Dana's page. Just follow, ask questions. Feel free, because then if you ask or DM or whatever, you could probably get more of a tailored response to whatever's going on, especially if you can give a description or whatnot.
Totally.
So
the book is called, somebody just asked, the Speller's Guidebook.
yes.
And you can get it on Amazon, but Chris is going to put the link.
Yeah, I'll put the link. Somebody asked, Kim said, my daughter's 13 and these conversations are really leaning. I love her therapist, but she's using farm. That's kind of what we were talking about. She's using farm animals, kids jumping, and Kim's daughter's 13. So that, and I don't want to like badmouth any professions. I always try not to do that because I don't know everybody's individual case, but presuming competence and realizing that your 13-year-old kid or 10-year-old kid has the same capacity to learn that typical 10-year-old kids do. They just can't express that because of the brain-body disconnect. So they appear, and I hate using it, dumber than they actually are. And I don't want to be mean, but that's what they're telling my kid. They were telling us that Marissa had the cognitive abilities of like a 3-year-old at 6, and here she's a freaking genius. So it's very misleading.
I also think, and Chris, I think you guys were ones that came to me. So I remember the first time that you guys came and we talked about presuming competence. And I think it was the next day. And you or Jess was like, we just started talking to her like that after that first day.
Yeah.
Like she was at that time, what, she was 8 or 9?
No, she was actually, I think 7.
She was 7?
Or 7 or 8? Yeah, 7 or 8,
and both of you commented on how she carried herself and how you noticed change in just her demeanor when you talked to her like she was 7 or 8, right? So I remember that.
Yes.
And I talked to other parents about that because, of course, if somebody was talking to me and like I was, unable to understand.
Or not even in the room.
Totally. Yes. My response, my behavior, the way that I would act or even think about myself would be totally different. And so I think that, professionals, and this is why I want to get all of this out there, is because I was one of those professionals, because that's what we were taught. And I don't, like you, Chris, I don't want to put any professional down unless they know this information and they're choosing not to do it. That's different. That's
then I hate you, because then you're literally holding kids back because you're too stubborn to believe that what you might have learned before was wrong. And I'll be the first to admit, for Marissa's first 7 years or whatever, we talked like she wasn't in the room. We kind of used baby voice. We definitely didn't presume competence or give her age-appropriate material. And like you said, is because that's what they were telling us at these $80,000 a year schools we were sending her to, and even public education. So they should know better than I do. So if they're talking to her like that, that's how I should talk to her. And then that trickle-down effect. The biggest thing, and I like that you brought that up, is the Edo and Autism land. Like, I remember just like, dude, we got this wrong. Like, what? And then I'm listening to it, and then we just began to talk to her like she's in the room. And now it's like, oh, I know you don't understand that, Marissa, but I know you can't move your body right now, and I know you understand. And building that confidence, because that brings them, I mean, what's more likely, how are you going to perform better? If somebody's doubting you all the time and not believing in what you do, or they actually understand what's going on and can help tailor something to that. Like, I know you know what a spoon is and you can't go get it right now, but let's go get it. Let's work on this together and stuff like that. It can make all the difference in the world.
Well, think of it like a coach.
Yes.
Right? Like if you're a coach on a sports team and they talk like down or about you in front, like, totally. Yes. So, there's another question. Do you want me to?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Okay. So my son is 12, spelling for 2 years, pushes back. Are some kids scared to become fully open? I thought this was a really interesting question.
That's really good.
Yeah. And I want to kind of talk about it in a couple of ways. Many of my clients will push back, some of which very intensely push back, scream, kick their parents, when they're spelling with their parents, say if they're unreliable speakers, no spelling, hate spelling, all these things. I've had a number of spellers that would work with me and really talk about how they're like, I want to get open with mom. I want, like, don't listen to my body. I have lessons on apraxia. I have lessons on dysregulation. And when I ask more of an open question from the lesson, they're like, don't listen to my body. Don't listen to the words. I don't want to hit, kick, punch. I don't want to do this. When dysregulation happens, and I tend to use impulsive or dysregulation rather than aggression or aggressive. And the reason is because when I'm aggressive towards somebody or something, that implies intent. And
There's motive behind
100%,
that. Yes.
totally.
Yes.
100% of the time, these individuals are not intentionally trying to do that kind of thing. So with that said, then what's happening in the body? Well, when we are in fight or flight, what is going to trigger those impulsive movements is a sensory experience or an emotion. And so emotions can be positive or negative, right? So we tend to interpret what we're seeing on the outside of, somebody acting as legit. So if somebody is hitting, kicking, punching, screaming, no, 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 it's like, oh, well, they must not want to do this then. I have had spellers
Yes.
that will tell me that their bodies will do things like that, and that can mean excitement. I love spelling with mom. I'm so excited. Like all of that. And so you're like, whoa, this is totally like my mind is just shifted. It adds to the complexity of apraxia. But so when I saw that question and I'm like pushes back, I don't know what exactly that looks like, but that's what came to my mind as far as that pushback. So what do we do, right? Like what do we do with that? Really, it's dysregulation that's happening. So the number one thing, my role, if as a provider, is to coach parents. Parents' number one role, or any other communication partner, isn't to spell with their child, or the caregiver is to spell with their child. The number one role is to regulate. Because if we're not regulated, we're not going to be able to do something that's a high motor skill or high motor. So we have to support that regulation, number one. So when this dysregulation is happening and we're pushing back or we're saying no, that to me would be dysregulation. So we have to work on supporting the regulation and what that means for that individual speller. As far as the second part of the question, do you find that kids are scared to become fully open? I myself have not experienced that. Does that mean that that's not the case? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I just wouldn't go to that conclusion because
They got a lot
this is where we talk about
to say.
they do have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I think that we're very quick to put our beliefs in the facts category by what we look at and what we see, right? So my child is on the floor screaming, right? It's a fact that they are not wanting to do this, or that I can't spell with them, or they don't want to spell with me. I get that a lot. They don't want to spell with me. Look at them. They're on the floor. Yeah. I'm like, is it a fact, or is that a belief that you have, right? Now, the good thing about it all is that beliefs can be changed. And the majority, 99.9% of what I talk to parents about is a belief, and we have to work on changing that, which is a process. But it can be
and absolutely, that's just another thing. Like, you cannot read their body as the end all be all. And I've shared this in videos too. Like, we used to leave places too early because we didn't think Marissa wanted to be there. And it's like, we're at the pool or the playground, and she's flipping out after 3 minutes. And maybe that's just an emotion of her not being able to control her body at that point. So then if now we know, like, dude, Marissa wants to be here. Let's calm her down, relax. Take a breath. Even if you got to leave, hey, we'll come back in a minute. Let's get this together, and then we'll come back. Before, we would be like, let's go. We're out. Like, this is it, And that's so misleading. It's wrong. And I've learned that from experience. So it's almost like that thing, like, you can't judge their body right away. And kind of piggyback off of that, Jess got hit in the face, like, last week or a week. I'm sure you've gotten punched too. Those kids feel freaking terrible about that. They do not want to punch you in the face. They're kicking. They just got holes kicked through the wall at Jess's place or whatever. That kid, he feels terrible. He does not want to do that. But those are uncontrollable emotions sometimes, and they act out in aggressive or aggression or however that may be. And it doesn't mean that they're mad or that they don't want to be there. It's just that that's how their body is reacting to that situation.
Exactly. And the number one thing to do in that instance is help regulate, co-regulate, right? Co-regulate. And their nervous systems can't do it on their own. So often what happens is that we tend to jump to calm down, chill, calm down, right? And like, let's be honest, Do we calm down when someone says
No.
to calm down? No. But so that's something where we have to work on and breathe, or whatever the strategy is. To your point, we may need to leave and then come back, which is totally fine.
Yes.
But that is something that is what we coach a lot of, is to help to co-regulate a speller.
Well, and that's just it, like getting them and understanding that that's what they're going through, because now I'm talking, now when I talk to Marissa, like, I know you got this,
Yeah.
Marissa, like, well, we're
Yeah.
fine, like, and then that builds their confidence because you understand what's going on with their body,
Yep.
and that you're not judging them, that they're like pissed or mad or whatever, and it's like, no, I know you have an uncontrollable
Yep.
body, it's rogue right
Yeah.
now, so we got to get it back to normal. And then massages or rub down, whatever the case may be, a walk, breathing's good. And I'm actually going to have Erin on like Friday, I think, because
Mm-hmm.
she's awesome with that too,
Mm-hmm.
for more
Mm-hmm.
OT perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll help people too, because it's a process, and you kind of got to flip everything you learned before, and it's weird, but when you do it and you do it consistently, you begin to see those results, and it just becomes natural then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does. It's more
Yeah.
automatic, for sure. For sure.
How much? I know you got stuff to do. We've been going at like an hour. Are you? What do you?
I got all through the questions. So unless there's
Okay.
more, like, I'm happy to, I have, another 5-6 minutes.
Yes.
Totally fine. Yeah.
So writes me down. And doesn't realize if you get, yes, you could read in their eyes. That's another thing. Stress. If they're punching you, they don't want to punch you. And then I hate the word, like, because that was the thing we used to hear like back in the older therapy days, like, oh, she's just being stubborn. And it's like that had to piss her off. She's just sitting there like, no, I'm not. I can't move my body. I want to
Yeah.
prove to you guys I'm not being stubborn. But that's another thing. They're not being stubborn. They want to show how smart they are. You can't read their body
Exactly.
as the answer. And okay, so let's talk about the course and how
Okay.
when that's available. Let's do stuff like that because that's
Yes.
important, and I want
Yes.
that to get out there.
Yes. So like I said, our course runs every 8 weeks. So we are in the first course of 2025 in week 4 or 5. So all the dates of the courses are on spellers.com. And if you go under resources at the top and then find CP course, you can register and you can look at those dates. We offer scholarships through Spellers Freedom Foundation. So, and they
Yeah.
change periodically for all of the amounts, but definitely apply for that. And that, like I said, you can apply every 8 weeks or register for it. The course is 8 weeks long. It matches you with one of our mentors. So you will attend a seminar once a week, just you. Your speller does not need to be there. And the reason why we did 8 weeks of the seminar is so that you, as a parent, get the underlying content and kind of the whole more academic clinical piece to understand the progression of what we're talking about here. We're talking, like Chris and I both talked about, like, okay, there's a progression to this. You have to start somewhere in order to move through all of each stages to get to that open communication. So we teach you those skills, plus the underlying neuro part of it, sensory motor part of it, all of that. So that's over 8 weeks. And then what you do is after each seminar, you then record 5 or 10 minutes of you spelling with your speller, and you're going to submit that to one of our mentors who will give you feedback on your video so that you can then the next week improve. So this is how you're going to continue to progress. So you have 7 videos that you can submit and get feedback from one of our Spellers Method providers. So that is just, like I said, it gets you going on a really strong start, and you have access to our people, and then you can continue on with them and or see another provider. All of those options are there. So that's really the main course to get things going. And then, like I said, our Spellers Guidebook is another resource. And then, coming to schedule, if you go to spellers.com, we have centers in Tampa. That's where I'm located. We just opened our center in Atlanta. So
Nice.
if you're close to Atlanta, I was just there over the weekend setting everything up. It's awesome.
Nice.
We have a center in Charleston, South Carolina, and then we have a Speller Center in San Diego. So lots of options.
Awesome. Yes, that's awesome. My wife did all that, the immersion weeks, which you also offer. Do you guys still do that where they come down to?
Yes. Actually, thanks for bringing that up, Chris, because we have a couple of spots left in Atlanta, and the dates for that is February 24th or 23rd through the 28th. So February 23rd to the 28th. And there you get a full week with us, parent seminars every single day, 2 spelling sessions, and 1 intentional motor session a day. And I just confirmed that Susan Daniel, who's a developmental optometrist, is going to be joining us for 1 full day doing vision screenings and assessments.
That's awesome.
So that's added in there. So she'll be there, and that's in Atlanta. And then we will be offering other immersions throughout the year. We will probably offer at least one more, and that will more than likely be in San Diego. So we don't offer them as often,
Yeah.
but it's an intense week. But you guys know
Oh,
it's a pretty
it
awesome
paid
week.
off dividend because the not only what you get while you're there, it's what you take home with you, obviously. So it's just more things, and then the hands-on approach of like watching how the practitioner works with your child, and then when the practitioner is standing there and watching you work with your child,
Mm-hmm.
it can build. I mean, that's just how you really get progress.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to touch on this because I kind of wanted your opinion on
Yep.
this real quick. Liv asked a good question. Is it normal for spellers to still gravitate towards infantile shows, videos, etc.? And I had a gut health a lady who's we talked on Friday about like gut health and stuff, and she said some stuff about how she cleaned up her son's diet like crazy, and he was eating Italian bread and like gluten and crap because they had for holidays they had like a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then she's like, then he's watching Coco Melon. He was watching like age appropriate things. So is that like, and then we kind of noticed that too because Marissa will watch like 11-year-old stuff, like whether it be like she likes these Grand Theft Auto videos where the guys like fall and get to, it's hilarious, but I'm like, whatever. And then all of a sudden she's watching Mickey and it's like, you don't want to watch Mickey. Is there something with like the inflammation of the gut brain that causes that to happen to where they like that demote back to those ways, but like, or is it like a comfort thing?
So I can't speak to the gut brain
Yeah.
situation there. Is it, I've never really looked at the correlation with that or if it is something that's related.
Yeah, because like it kind of makes sense though, because like if we're I don't know, she's good, like she's always watching like Age of Pro, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, why are you watching Mickey out of nowhere?
Well, and
So I don't want people to think like, well, why does my 9-year-old watch Mickey? They're not even they got a 3-year-old mind, and that's not necessarily the case. I also think like maybe it's like a nostalgia thing, like how I like
mhm.
I can watch an episode of Rugrats or something because it's what I watched when I was a child and still like feel like I'm kind of entertained by this, whereas my kids' cartoons don't entertain me. So maybe it's something along those lines that acts out. And we're getting off topic, but I don't know. It was just I don't want you guys
No,
thinking that your 3-year-old or your 12-year-old kid that's watching Mickey is that's all he can cognitively handle. You know?
right. In my experience, so what I was going to suggest with it is based off of spellers, right, who have talked to me about this, and what they have said is that it is something that is comforting and regulating, and that, but having said that, I've had a couple where they're older, like 25, older than that, where they don't want to take Elmo or on their iPad and Blue's Clues. They don't want that out in public
Yes.
necessarily, but when they come home and they need, just like all of us, right? We scroll through social media and it's like, but it's just kind of decompressing. And I also think like myself at Christmas time, I'll watch Charlie Brown's Christmas because it just brings, like you just said, right? So I think
Yes.
there's a component of that. So if I look at that, and then I also, if I were to guess at the, gut brain, that kind of thing, is when we're feeling off, it could be that we're not feeling so great. So we're going to kind of gravitate to that versus if we are feeling great and much better, then we're going to be able to take in higher level cognitive input. It's going to be more regulating for us, those kinds of
Yeah.
things. But certainly I don't ever advocate to like not like allow those things to happen. I think it in some ways it needs to be a gradual thing, and this is where open spellers can then advocate for themselves and say, I don't want this anymore, and then we're going to work on a plan to be able to do that and change.
Yeah.
There was one question, Chris, about, and I think it's important, I just saw it pop up, and that was, is it only nonverbal or non-speakers that this is for? And the answer to that in terms of spelling is no. I
Yes.
have some spellers where parents look at me like I have three heads when I suggest that their quote unquote verbal speller should be spelling. And some of them we call unreliable speakers, where it is more scripted, right? And they kind of like, good morning, Miss Dana, how are you? I'm great, Mac, how are you? Well, like it's going back and forth, but it's not anything that's original. It's kind of the
Yeah.
script, right? And it's amazing for some of my clients where what comes out is the younger, just maybe 5-6 year old level of speech or even just single words, but yet when you get to spelling and they're spelling openly, it is like 180-degree
Yes.
difference, like night
Yes.
and day.
Yeah.
So no, absolutely, I would say unreliable or minimal speakers are less apraxic than non-speakers, but they definitely need some support with that.
Well, and they can get their full thought process out that they might be hindered by because they
Yeah.
can't speak on. I have so when we did the Minnesota conference,
Hmm.
we traveled as like a group, and one of the older boys, love him to death. He came with us, and I learned like you told us about unreliable speech. You were the first one that did it, and it cleared up a lot. But seeing it, because if you ask him what he wants to eat, he'll say rice and beans no matter what. He
Yep.
does not only want to eat rice and beans. But that's just the script that comes out, and it clicked because it's like he'll eat, he does not want, and then you put him boards in front of him to spell out what he wants.
Yes.
But if you ask him, and
Yep.
then if you don't know what unreliable speech is, you're going to just give him rice and beans every time, and that might cause dysregulation too.
Right.
So
Right. Totally.
reading that is just or understanding where that's coming from is huge and can definitely
Yep.
help. So yes, the kids that do speak a little bit, still put them in front of boards and see what they truly are capable of or whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
thank you for this. This is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm gonna repost this. I'll put links and all that stuff. Follow if you're in the chat, follow Dana and then the Spellers Center. She's Tampa. You can follow spellers.com, any of them. And please watch. I have told a million people on here to watch that damn documentary. It's free on YouTube.
Yeah.
It explains everything better than I can in the video. I'm just trying to spread awareness and then pointing people in the right direction. And that is the right direction because that movie and all that stuff will help you so much understand this stuff better. And then the book Underestimated, the Speller's Guidebook, all those stuff, man. And Ito, I props to Ito because he was the first one.
Yep.
All that stuff will definitely help you understand it better. And it's more entertaining than I am. So, no.
Not by
But
much. Not by
yeah,
much.
but no, seriously, thank you for this. We'll have to do this again. As soon as I
Yeah.
get the podcast rolling, you're on it. You know
Awesome.
that, and we can dive into apraxia detail more, and because it helps me understand stuff too. So
Perfect.
please follow Dana. I'm gonna post all these links and everything, and I'm gonna try to remix this video better. I'm learning the new IG ways or whatever. So.
Awesome.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thanks.
And everybody, sorry, we were not trying to be rude. I did not answer the questions, a lot of them. Please message us or her
Yeah.
or whatnot
Yeah.
and all that, and it'll be way easier that way.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody who's here. Thank you very much, Dana. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay. See you
Appreciate it.
later.